Welcome to The Real Deal. I'm Gabby McKeown from McGrath, and I wanted to have a chat to you today about something which does concern each and every one of you, whether you're a landlord or whether you are a tenant, or even if you just live in Queensland, you probably want to be up to speed about what is happening as of the 1st of October 2022. Now, we do know, and we did know always, that the Queensland Government under Labor would be bringing in some new changes to the Residential Tenancy and Rooming Accommodation Act, and this governs all residential tenancies in Queensland. So these were new amendments. Now, if you are currently a tenant, okay, and you are in a fixed lease, effectively when it runs out and no notice is given to vacate, or you haven't been given the option to stay on with a new lease being signed, it lapses into what we call a periodic lease. Now, many sellers love a tenant being on a periodic lease, and many tenants love being on a periodic lease because there is zero commitment. It's like you're engaged, but there's no marriage in sight. Okay. Now, this is all changing as of the 1st of October, and I need you to be very, very careful that if you currently have somebody sitting in your property on a periodic lease, you really run the risk of getting into trouble and having that person there as a permanent tenant if you don't know the legislation. If you don't know the legislation and you want me to reiterify it, I certainly can, or you want to chat to us about us managing your property so we can make sure you don't get into trouble, more than happy to do so again. Now, let's talk about the notice to leave. Now, if you currently have a tenant that's in a periodic lease, after the 1st of October, and you decide that you want the tenant to go, perhaps you don't like the tenant's rowdy, or there's an issue, or the tenant complains a lot, or the tenant's a bit grubby, or simply because you're not sure what you want to do with the property, you might want to renovate, or you might want to sell it, you're going to run the risk of not being able to get rid of the tenants unless you have grounds. Now, what are the grounds in order to ask a tenant to leave if they're in a periodic lease? Well, these are the grounds. Demolition or redevelopment. You have to give 2 months' notice. Now, you cannot give false or misleading information, or there is a $6,892.50 fine. So let's call it a close-on $7,000 fine. If you are doing significant repairs or renovations to your property, you are allowed to give the tenant notice. However, again, you can't give false or misleading information. So you can't just change a toilet seal or put in a silicone in the bathroom. You've actually got to do significant repairs or renovations, or they'll fine you close to $7,000. Change of use. Well, that's self-explanatory. If you change the use of the unit, again, you can get rid of the tenant, but again, you have to give 2 months' notice. Now, this is the big one. This is the big one, okay, is if you're wanting to sell the property. Because most of the time people want to ask a tenant to go is because they want to sell a property. And of course, so many people have sold their investment properties because the market's been really strong, and it's particularly strong at the moment for units. So if you're holding onto a unit and you're thinking, well, you know, the housing market's already done well, but the unit market's beginning to fire up on all cylinders, and there's quite a high demand for units at the moment with the Olympics coming, and might be a great time now to sell my unit. Well, that's all very well and good. But if your tenant is on a periodic lease and you think, well, we'll keep them there, but the tenant doesn't actually want to go, and we sell it to someone who wants to move in, you cannot just tell the tenant, by the way, somebody's buying it to move in. That tenant can stay there as long as they like, okay? So you have to be very, very aware of that. Now, if you do want to sell the property, you can ask the tenant to go, but if you don't get a sale on that property and you don't get the price you want and the tenant's gone, you cannot re-let that property for 6 months. And if you do, again, there's a fine of close to $7,000. Now, there is one exception, which is quite nice for grounds. So if, for example, I have a unit and it's rented and my son, who's a family member, wants to move in, yes, he is allowed to move in. Isn't that thoughtful of the government? 2 months' notice, however, do need to be given, and if he doesn't move in but one of his friends moves in and the government discover that I've given false or misleading information, again, I could be fined at $6,892.50 and 50 cents. So how does it feel, everyone, to be in a country where even our personal assets are governed heavily? How do you feel about this? Well, at the end of the day, if we voted the government in, we are to blame. We are currently in a democracy, even though it doesn't feel like it. But of course, we are very concerned. There is a way around that, and if you want to discuss it with me, pick up the phone, give me a call. We'd love to manage your property, and I'd love to give you as much information as I can, along with my amazing property management team, and look after you in every area. Thank you.